I love the ocean. I mean, I really love the ocean and everything about it, the waves, the salt water, and especially the animals. Now, I used to spend a lot of time down in Baja California, Mexico. Almost every morning before everyone woke up, I would take a kayak out by myself and enjoy the solitude. Well, not totally. I'd see whales, tons of fish, and lots of times I would see sea turtles. Don't you just love sea turtles? Well, if you haven't seen them swimming, or even if you have, don't you think they almost look like aliens the way they glide through the water? Well, in today's episode, Brad Nahill, he joins me. He's the co-founder and director of SeaTurtles.org. Now, how about this? Can you imagine this mission to save 1 billion baby turtles? Sound crazy? Well, they're trying to do that and so much more. Now, have you ever given any thought to where all that turtle shell jewelry comes from? We're going to delve into that. And also their campaign, Too Rare to Wear. I said that pretty good, I think. Did you know there are 7 species of turtles in the world, and one, the leatherback, can be several feet long? I'm talking like 7 feet, maybe even longer, and sometimes weigh upwards of 2,000 pounds. Did you know that sea turtles eat jellyfish? How about this one? 1 in 1,000 sea turtles survive to be adults. Brad and his organizations are doing lots to help these amazing reptiles. And in this episode, the turtle definitely beats the hare. We are supported by PrepVet, providing stem cell therapy for pets.
As a pet lover, did you know your pet can benefit from the incredible healing power of stem cell therapy? Prep Therapy offers a groundbreaking solution taken right from your pet's own blood. Say goodbye to joint pain, arthritis, kidney and liver conditions, and more. They'll experience faster recovery, increased vitality, and extended quality of life without the need for surgery or harmful drugs. Put the wag back in their tail and discover Prep Therapy today at PrepVet.com. Save 10% with promo code FurRealPodcast, covered by most pet insurance.
For real, 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 for real. Got a bunch of furry friends and I love them all the same. I'm an animal lover, veterinarian is the name. Let's share some pet stories from heartwarming to strange, losses and gains, from wacky to insane. For real. You're now tuned in to For Real with your host, Mark Kyle.
Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the For Real Podcast. Today, my guest is Brad Nahill. He's the co-founder and president of Sea Turtles and at SeaTurtles.org, actually. But I've been excited to talk to him. There's a lot of reasons we want to get this one out this week. And Brad, thanks so much for joining us, and let's just jump into it.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, thank you for having us. I'm excited to be here.
Well, what I want to do is, I definitely want to get into turtles and the whole thing. Obviously, that's what we're talking about. But let's talk about a little bit about you. You know, where you're from. I know you're in Portland now. I don't know if you started there, but let's get a little of your background and how you got to where you are today and some of the cool stuff.
Sure. Yeah, I do live in Portland, Oregon now, but I grew up outside of Philadelphia, and yeah, pretty typical East Coast suburban upbringing. But yeah, the way that I got into turtles was not the typical route for it. Our co-founder, Jay Nichols, when he was a kid, he was hanging out in the Chesapeake Bay and he would catch turtles and paint numbers on them and see if they came back, and sort of
Oh, wow.
rudimentary study as a kid. So he was born to work with these animals. Me, no, had no interest. I didn't know anything about them.
Yeah.
I didn't have a pet turtle. I like to joke that I didn't even watch the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Like zero
That's funny.
zero connection to these animals. But I went to college. I went to Penn State. And while I was there, I became more aware of environmental issues. And I decided while I was there that I wanted to do that for my career. So when I graduated, I knew I wanted to go spend some time in Latin America and see the world. And I knew that pretty much all the knowledge I had about this field was, from textbooks and magazines and documentaries and stuff. So I wanted to go see it and experience it. And so I went online, and I believe this is pre-Google. We're talking about like 1999, and did some research of conservation projects that I could volunteer with. And from what I remember of the searches that came up, like 9 out of 10 were volunteering with sea turtles, and
Wow.
8 out of those 9 were in Costa Rica.
Cool.
So I said, okay, I guess I'm going to work with sea turtles in Costa Rica.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I knew nothing about them, really, literally. I did a little bit of research before I went, but I was like, that sounds like fun. It'll be great for my resume, and, I'll have a great experience. And so let's go do it. And so I went to Costa Rica, spent about 6 weeks working on a leatherback turtle nesting beach. And then after that, I went and worked on an organic farm for a few months, and I loved it. And, figured, all right, now I'm going to go back home and add that to my resume, and get a office job, and go from there. And I sort of did that. I went to DC. I got an internship with a group working on climate change. Every single day, I had this picture from Costa Rica on my desk, and I found myself staring at it.
DC, Costa Rica, I don't know what my choice would be.
Yeah, yeah. I have a lot of family and friends in DC, so no offense, but I did not really enjoy living there.
I know, I've been there. I've been there, spent some time there.
Yeah. And so I said, you know what? I'm going back to Costa Rica when that internship ended. And so I went there, and I ended up going to another turtle nesting beach. And from there, I met a woman who ended up becoming my wife. She's not my ex wife, but she was a research assistant, and fell in love with her and fell in love with the turtles. And then from there, we got offered to start a new nesting beach conservation project in another part of Costa Rica. So we ended up working on a few different nesting beaches while we were there. And then eventually I moved back to the States. And that's when I met Jay Nichols, who I mentioned before, who came up with the idea for a conservation project based on helping coastal communities develop tourism as a tool for conservation. And that was the seed of sea turtles.
So what kind of ecotourism kind of thing?
Yeah, ecotourism, volunteer tourism. There's a lot of terms for it.
Uh-huh.
The term that we like to use is conservation travel, which kind of goes a step beyond
Sure.
ecotourism. So we define that as travel that supports local conservation efforts in the destinations that you visit. And we would include coastal communities, the local communities as well in that definition.
So, it's funny, a couple of things just to add in. So when I was growing up, my grandmother had a place on Chesapeake Bay. So I spent a lot of time on there as a kid. My parents would ship me and my brother, there were 5 of us, and we were the 2 oldest. They'd ship us out there for the summer, and we'd spend the summer, the softback, the soft shell crabs, and on the water the entire time we're there. I don't remember if I ever even saw a turtle on there. That's crazy.
Yeah, these weren't sea turtles that he was working
Oh,
with, but yeah, there are some freshwater turtles around. Maybe you two crossed paths at one point because he did a very similar thing. But yeah, the Chesapeake Bay is amazing, but yeah, not a hotbed for sea turtles.
no, I'm trying to remember that. The other thing is, and I've traveled extensively all over the world. I've been down in South America and all that. I've yet to get to Costa Rica. I've been wanting to go forever, and there's 2 points I'm going to make. One is I'm actually going in September to go surfing with some good friends of mine. But I've been trying to get down there before the Americans started taking over, and you got down there right before it start going to, all the all the resort, the eco resorts and all eco resorts, I guess is a better word, but all the yoga retreats and all that. Back then, it was a lot less discovered, and it's such a cool country. I just never had a chance to get there.
Yeah, it is a really amazing country. I would say I did not get there before tourism really became a thing. I would say probably 5 to 10 years before that is when ecotourism in Costa Rica really exploded. But yeah, it's grown quite a bit since then.
Yeah,
They do have some really good laws and regulations in place for things like building on the coast, which is obviously very impactful for sea turtles. And in terms of their conservation laws and enforcement, it's better there than in most places. So, there's definitely parts of the country that that have experienced over tourism and, just
Sure.
giant resorts on the beach and stuff. But I'd say compared to almost the entire rest of the planet, they do a really, really good job there. So there's still lots of really beautiful beaches, lots of great protected areas and stuff to see. And we can chat afterwards because I'm sure I can connect you with a turtle nesting beach.
Oh, that'd be awesome. I mean, it's funny is
Yeah.
I think Costa Rica may be the only country that's never had a war.
Yeah, they don't even have an army.
I know. It's the craziest thing ever. And they have this great medical system. I
Yes.
mean, I know a lot about it. I just have never been there.
Yeah, it's an amazing country in so many ways, and I feel really privileged to be able to have spent so much time there. I lived there for about 2 years in total, and then I take groups back there all the time. I've lost count how many times I've been there, but every time I go, I absolutely love it. So I highly recommend it.
Oh, well, let's do that. But let's get back. So now, how did you meet Jay?
I met Jay at a international sea turtle symposium. It's actually kind of a funny story. We have daughters who are very close in age, and I don't know if you've heard of Sylvia Earle. She's a very prominent ocean conservationist. She's spent more time underwater than just about anybody else alive.
Wow.
She's an absolute icon. And she was giving a keynote address to an international sea turtle symposium. I believe it was in Florida, and both of our daughters were being fussy at the same time during Sylvia's speech. And so the two of us went out into the lobby and we're kind of, we didn't want the whining of the kids. I mean, they were babies
Sure.
to interrupt Sylvia's speech. So we were kind of standing out in the lobby, listening from a distance and, chatting and soothing our daughters at the same time. And that's where we first met. And then years later, Jay was hired to work at Ocean Conservancy, where I was working at the time. And I was doing grant writing, and he was hired to be their sea turtle specialist. And the idea for sea turtles was the first thing he brought to the organization. And when he pitched it to me with my background in sea turtles and everything, I said, "Oh my God, I've worked in ecotourism. I was like, this is perfect." And so I kind of took the idea and ran with it. We developed the idea together. I raised the funds for it, and we launched it under Ocean Conservancy, and then eventually took it out on our own. And we're now an independent organization. But years later, Jay ended up being the president of a sea turtle symposium in Baja in Loreto.
Sure. I know Loretto well. I've spent a lot of time in Baja.
Yeah, Loreto's an amazing little town. And our daughters were both there and they were fast friends during that whole week. They just spent the entire week just running around Loreto. It was really fun.
That's cool. I like that little square there. So, how did you guys go? You're at the symposium, you become friends, you work together. How do you end up in Portland? Is that where that was?
No, I was in DC at the time,
Right.
but looking for a way to get out of DC.
Sure.
I was in DC on 9/11,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the trying to, which is stressful, which just creates sort of an everyday background level of stress living in a place where
Sure.
something like that has happened. And so that really affected me. And then, I was living on a nonprofit salary. And so to be able to afford, a place to live where we felt comfortable and safe was an hour outside of town. And I was commuting, an hour each way. I was missing my daughter growing up. And so I had visited Portland on a cross country trip in college and really fell in love with it in the Pacific Northwest. So we had a lot of donors based on the West Coast. So I convinced that organization, Ocean Conservancy, to let me move to Oregon and work from home, heading up fundraising from the West Coast. And they were on board with that. And so I did that while I was still at Ocean Conservancy and early on with sea turtles. So yeah, that's how I moved out here. I just wanted to be here.
Yeah, well, like I said when we were originally talking, I went to school in Oregon, so I know Portland really well too. I always find I have a lot because I've been around so much. I always have something, some commonality with any person I'm talking to. So let's get into turtles for everybody. I mean, we've got, well, you guys go out there, you start the organization together. And then how did it grow from there? And then let's get into the details about, let's educate people about all the different species and stuff like that.
Yes, sure. So, yeah, we started out focusing on conservation travel. So, working with the tourism industry to encourage tour operators to include visits to turtle nesting beaches, beach cleanups, things like that. And we had some success with that. But we realized after a couple of years of, we want to have a bigger impact than that. And, the tourism world is big, but the number of people going to take sea turtle related trips is not huge.
Okay.
And so after a couple of years, Jay came up with an idea. He said, "Hey, how much does it cost to save a baby turtle?" And I was like, "That's a really good question." He's like, "Is it $1? Because I bet we could raise $1 to save a baby turtle, or 1,000 or 100,000 to save 100,000."
Sure.
So that's a really interesting way to look at it. So we got in touch with a bunch of our colleagues in working on nesting beaches, and we asked them, "What's your budget? And how many hatchlings do you save?" We came up with numbers for the different ones. And it turned out it actually came out to closer to 10 baby turtles saved for every dollar donated.
Really?
Yeah. And now it's even higher than that because of one beach in particular that we can get into. But we said, "Oh, I think we have something here." So we started this program. We call it Billion Baby Turtles. That's our goal.
So is that your guys' program? I was going to ask you that because I saw on your website you had all that stuff. So that's your program.
Yes, it's a program of sea turtles. Yes.
Okay, cool.
And so what we decided to do was, let's raise funds to support these incredible communities working really hard, walking miles and miles for hours and hours a night on these remote beaches. Let's get them the funding that they need to protect those beaches.
Right.
And so that's where Billion Baby Turtles started, and that started about 10 years ago, and we're now around 13 million hatchlings saved in that program and accelerating quite a bit. Like last year, we saved 4 million alone.
So 13 million would be 1.3 million, something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, okay. Cool. That's really cool.
Yeah, over those 10 years, but the program is growing quite a bit. It's become quite popular with businesses. So, we work with sponsors that sell a T-shirt and every purchase saves 10 baby turtles, that kind of thing. It's a very clear, easy message.
Cool.
But yeah, those funds go to communities working on. Right now, we're supporting about 50 turtle nesting beaches around the world in about 20 countries, where we send the funds to these locally based organizations, and then they use it to pay local residents to walk up and down the beaches, to equip them with the equipment that they need, to build hatcheries, which is a little area of beach that's fenced off, where the nests can be watched until they hatch. Because what happens in a lot of places is there's a black market for the eggs. There's a strong cultural belief in a lot of countries that eating a turtle egg makes you viral, sort of like a.
Yeah, I know. There's so many weird, especially probably in Asian culture in particular. I mean, I've spent a lot of time over there, and there's more weird things they eat that they think that's going to make them big studs. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, Latin America, Asia, Africa, there's a lot of these strong cultural beliefs. And I mean, there's a lot of reasons for it. We can see where it comes from. There's no science to support that.
Right.
There's nothing in those eggs that really has been shown to have those kinds of
Protein.
effects. Yeah, lots of protein.
Yeah.
But the good news is that has been reduced quite a bit in a lot of places. But, when you're working in a lot of these communities with these cultural beliefs, you really have to be sensitive to the cultures and the beliefs, and also the local economics of it, because in a lot of these places, people's income depends on that.
Sure.
And so we don't want to be like the US based organization going into these communities and saying, "Hey, this is what you can and can't do,"
Mhm.
because a lot of these communities have been depending on turtles for their sustenance and their income for generations.
For generations. Yeah.
And so that's why we support these locally based organizations. We're getting funds into these communities where people are getting paid to do this work, which is bringing income in. where possible, we're bringing travelers in, which is supporting the local economy. So we're trying to promote, education and alternatives, but done in a culturally sensitive way by the people who live there. Because I mean, you may have heard about this from some of the other conservationists that you've spoken to, but there is a history of US based, European based conservationists going into developing countries, finding these biodiversity hotspots, convincing the governments to create protected areas, and then pushing indigenous communities or local communities
Sure.
off the lands. And that creates a lot of conflict. And really, while in a lot of those places, people might cut down some trees, they might illegally hunt some animals, eat some eggs, things like that. They're not the primary reasons that these animals are endangered. It's the big international trade, it's the big international players. But these communities often take the brunt of the impacts from creating protected areas. So, we really try hard to do things in a way that supports the communities and the turtles.
Well, and that makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, first of all, if you're giving money to the local organizations, you're also bringing money because they've got to have people work for them. You're creating jobs, you're doing other things. So you're actually giving back to the community while you're protecting the turtles.
Yeah, and in a lot of the places where we're sending funds to and supporting and partnering with these local organizations, they're hiring the people that used to collect the eggs to sell them, and they're now conservationists. And I have a bunch of friends who grew up eating turtles, eating their eggs, using their shells, selling them, who are now some of the most dedicated, hardworking conservationists I've ever met.
Well, it's kind of like somebody who used to smoke cigarettes. They become so blatantly on the other side of it because they become aware of how bad it is. It's the same idea.
Yeah, and in a lot of cases, to be completely honest, these folks know how to find a turtle nest better than a biologist. They certainly knew how to do it better than I did when I was volunteering on these beaches because they grew up looking for these nests.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's cool.
Yeah, they have this intrinsic knowledge that in a lot of places and for a long time has not been valued by the conservation community. But I think that's starting to change.
I love that idea. I mean, the idea of working with the community and helping them. And so you're in 20 country, or you have 20 organizations or 20 countries. I missed that.
We have, I mean, between our different programs, we probably have 100, 150 local partners working in
Okay.
different places around the world.
And so when you're working around the world, because one of the things I read was that there's 7 species of sea turtles. Is that the right number?
Yes.
And are you working with all 7 of them?
Not currently at the moment. There's the flatback in Australia that is only in a handful of places,
Mhm.
and generally we try to focus on because we're trying to address these economic issues. We're primarily supporting groups in developing countries, and so Australia isn't a place where we
Sure.
provide a lot of support to. There's funding there in Australia for that work.
And there's more money, so that because of that, the population's more educated, so they understand better probably too.
There's that, but there's also more funding available for that work.
Okay, okay.
There's less of a need for funding in Australia than in, Kenya or Mexico, for example.
Right, exactly. So let's talk about turtles.
Mhm.
Now that we have a basis of what you guys are doing, and maybe talk about some of the places you're at, what kind of turtles they are, the difference and all that, so we can all kind of understand that.
Sure. Yeah. So, of the 7 species, the ones we don't work with are the flatback and the Kemp's Ridley at the moment, because the Kemp's Ridley is also very geographically limited. They're pretty much in the Gulf of Mexico. And there's only a couple of nesting beaches for them that are pretty well protected already. But I'd say the animal that we focus the most on is the hawksbill sea turtle.
Mhm.
They're one of the 2 species of sea turtles that are considered critically endangered by the World Conservation Union, which is the global list of endangered animals and plants.
Is that based on climate change mainly?
That is based on the trade in their shell. So, if you've heard of tortoise shell,
Okay.
it's actually a bit of a misnomer. It comes from the hawksbill sea turtle, and It was plastic before plastic was invented because the shells are very beautiful
Hmm.
and they're very pliable. You can shape them and form them into many different shapes. And so tortoiseshell was found in the libraries of Alexandria thousands of years ago,
Wow.
made into all different kinds of products that are now, plastic or other sort of synthetic material. But there was a huge trade in the shell of the hawksbill turtle. The international trade has been illegal since the 1990s. It's still happening in a number of countries, but that's also reduced quite a bit, and we're starting to see some recovery of hawksbills in some places in Latin America in particular, which is very encouraging. There's actually a surprising amount of good news that we can get into around sea turtles. But yeah, it's primarily because of that. So if people are familiar with the pattern of tortoiseshell, like the
Sure.
cat and stuff, it's orange and gold and brown, that kind of thing. If you see it in the US, most of the time it's synthetic. Like I have a pair of glasses that have that pattern, but that's synthetic.
Right.
But the real stuff is still sold in quite a few places in Latin America and Asia today.
So, from your knowledge, because you're around it all the time, I'm betting you would maybe know, but most people wouldn't know the difference between synthetic and real. So why would you get real, right?
Yeah, well, because we
It's real.
well, there's maybe a little bit of that. There doesn't seem to be a strong cultural tie like ivory, where if I have this product, it's going to have this impact.
Mhm.
Um, most cases, as far as we're aware, if a US tourist is in a place where these products are sold and they're buying them, they're probably not realizing that they're actually buying an endangered animal, because it's hard to connect what you see on a table in a marketplace back to the animal itself. It looks like it's probably some sort of synthetic material. And so what we do a lot of, we have a program called Too Rare to Wear, which we created a guide of how to tell the difference between what's real and what's plastic or coconut or other similar materials. And we're really excited and proud of this. We actually created a phone app that uses machine learning, kind of a form of artificial intelligence, where if you're in a place, say in Costa Rica or Nicaragua, or Colombia or Indonesia or China, and you see a product and you're not sure, you can snap a photo and it'll compare it to this database of photos that we've collected and tell you with a pretty high degree of accuracy if it's real tortoiseshell or not. So you can know to avoid it.
Oh, that's so cool. That's like what you can do with birds and plants and stuff like that. So, while we're on this, since we're talking it, how would people find that?
We can find it on our website. You can Google Seashell. It's on Android and Apple platforms. If you look up Seashell, which is spelled SEE shell, you can find it there to download. You can also find it on our website, which is, and I don't think we mentioned this before, but we're sea turtles, but we spell it SEE because we want people to go and see them in person.
Right.
So it's
Oh.
not SEA turtles, but it's seeturtles.org. And there you can find links to download the app as well as the guide and other things like that.
Well, it's funny. I was going to ask you where the sea came from, but now I totally get it. I actually love it. Now that I get it, tells you how I am as slow as a turtle. But now I get it. I love that. I love that, and that's something I won't forget at all. Now, once you understand it, it's perfect.
Yeah. But so yeah, we're talking about the different species of turtles. So there's the hawksbills. They love the coral reef. So if you're snorkeling in a coral reef and you see a very colorful turtle, it's probably a hawksbill. As you might imagine, the shape of their beak is shaped like the bill of a hawk.
Right.
So they're pretty identifiable that way, and for their colorful shell. Although they can look pretty similar to green turtles who are sometimes in coral reefs. So if you're in a coral reef snorkeling, it's either a hawksbill or a green turtle. So we work with green turtles a fair amount. They're actually called green turtles, not because the color of their shell, which is sometimes green, but not always.
I know why.
Yeah, yeah. So why is that?
Because they're the only ones as adults that are herbivores, right?
Yes,
How about that? I did some reading.
good for you. Excellent. Yeah. So that means, what does that mean?
It means they're vegetarians, basically.
Yeah. So why are they called greens for what they eat then?
I would assume that's what it is, or do they turn green because of that?
You're close. So their fat turns green.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yes, and so turtle soup, there's still turtle soup.
Right,
It used to primarily be from green turtles. They're the primary ones that people eat. Apparently, their meat, and probably related to them being herbivores,
right.
is the tastiest meat of the sea turtles. And there was a huge international trade in that, which is pretty much gone. They are still eaten locally in a number of places, but when people would cook the soup, it would turn green from their fat.
Oh, wow. I'm
Yeah.
I'm so glad you're telling me this. See, for you guys listening, I'm just as much wonderment as you probably are right now. This is great.
Yeah, so that's why they're called green turtles. In some places, they're black. There is a black turtle, which is a considered a subspecies. There's been some debate about whether the black turtle is an eighth species. It's mostly been settled within the scientific community, although I do know some folks who do still think it may be a distinct eighth species and not a subspecies of green turtles.
Mhm.
And so we work with them quite a bit. We work with the leatherback turtle, which is the one that I've done most of my field work with, and I think is the most fascinating. I had an appointment at the bank yesterday, and I mentioned that I work with turtles, and someone was like, "Oh, I was on a beach recently, and I heard they get really big." And I pulled up a photo of me with a leatherback, and they were blown away because these things are monstrous. They look like they could be like in a Star Wars movie. Did you get a chance to see a photo of them? Are you familiar with one?
I saw the photo and I read they're the largest one, right? And but I was wondering, I've never seen one live unless I saw it in some aquarium or something. I don't think I have because they get up to what, 7 feet or something like that? Or bigger?
Yeah. So yes, and when we talk about their length, that we're just talking about their shell as well, and they have enormous heads. So they can get up to 8, 9 feet in total length.
Wow.
The biggest one ever found was estimated to be about 12 feet, but that was a long time ago. And there's some debate around that, but we definitely don't find them that large anymore. The ones that we're finding on the beaches, like when we take our trips or with our local partners, are generally like 5 to 6 feet long, and they can be 600 pounds, 800, maybe 1,000 pound sea turtle.
And where are they where are they? Where do you find them?
They're found in tropical areas around the world, although because of their large size, there's this fun word. I don't know if you come across it. It's called gigantothermy.
No, but I like the name too.
Yeah, it's a fun word. And so the concept of that is whenever there's animals that live in cold places, the ones that you find in cold places are going to be bigger than the ones in the warm places. So if you think about a polar bear versus a black bear that lives in California, polar bears are like twice the size of a black bear, maybe more.
Because 'Cause they're more fat.
Yeah, I'm not a bear person, but yeah, fat and just the size of their body, it's a ratio of their surface area to their size. So the
Mhm.
bigger you are, the more you can hold heat in, basically.
Wow, that's cool.
So that means that the leatherbacks can go into cold areas. So here on the West Coast, they come from Indonesia and Malaysia to California. They go past me up the coast of Oregon and they go to the waters of Alaska where they're looking for giant jellyfish.
So now you just mentioned something I read. So, and I'll let you tell the deal, but
Mhm.
I guess it was some kids movie that I was talking about, and I've read it, but I'm gonna let you tell it, is, there's a story out there that the turtles like to eat jellyfish because they hallucinate on them similar to other things, I guess, other people eating other things. So tell them that obviously it's a legend, not a truth, but do you know the history behind that at all?
I'll be honest, that's not.
Oh, I found something you didn't know. So apparently there's a it's been debunked because the jellyfish, I mean, the turtles really like to eat jellyfish. They really like it, and they don't get the poison that stings us. It doesn't affect them at all. But there was a kids movie. I wish I could remember the name of it.
Oh.
So people thought that turtles were eating them because they were basically hallucinating, getting high off of eating them. That's why they liked them. But they said it's absolutely not true. They like to eat them.
I've heard about that for sloths, that the cecropia tree has some psychoactive properties to it, and they eat the leaves of them,
Uh-huh.
and maybe that's why they're so slow. Um,
Well, I know this one's not true. Now you've got something to Google afterwards, and you can find the whole detail on it. But I was going to ask you about it because I thought I always like those silly things that come out about things, but it's
yeah,
totally not true. But it was from some
huh.
animated movie that kids liked, and he said, "Oh, they like those because they get really happy after they eat them."
That's pretty funny. I will have to look that up. But yeah,
Yeah,
they eat lots of jellyfish. And I think this is one of the most fascinating things about these animals because there's not a lot of animals in the ocean, as you might imagine,
sure.
that eat jellyfish. And so and leatherbacks eat a lot of jellyfish. And when I talk to kids, I love to ask them like, "Do you think you could eat a jellyfish?" And they're all like, "No." So a
Gross.
leatherback has been estimated to eat more than half its weight in jellyfish per day while they're feeding.
Wow. Well, good. They're getting rid of them for us to go swimming.
Yes, and so I ask, "All right, how many of you like to swim in the ocean?" And they all raise their hands. I was like, "Well, then you want there to be a lot of leatherbacks
Yeah.
because they help control the numbers of jellyfish, and there's a lot more because of all the things that are happening in the ocean. The numbers of jellyfish are exploding. Yeah, so they eat a lot of jellyfish. But jellyfish, yeah, they're mostly water, so you have to eat a lot of them to get the fat and the nutrient content that they need. And you're in Florida, correct?
No, I'm in Texas.
You're in Texas. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, on the East Coast, the leatherbacks live in the Caribbean and on the Central American coast, and they come up the East Coast and they'll go all the way up to Canada. So they're going all the way up the East Coast looking for the jellyfish as well. So they do these huge migrations, to find their food.
Well, as big as are they in deeper water then than this, like you were saying, the other ones like the coral reefs and that. So are they in deeper water because they're so big, or what kind of depth do you find them at?
They will venture into deeper water, into open ocean. When they're migrating, they're kind of hanging out along the coast mostly, but they and a lot they kind of follow the Gulf Stream. So they kind of use that current. If any of you folks are familiar with Finding Nemo,
Yeah.
and it's a different current, but the turtle in Finding Nemo is following along a current, and they will do that. It helps them, use less energy in their migrations. So they're kind of following that up the East Coast. But after they're done in Canada, in that part of the world, they'll go occasionally they'll go all the way over to the UK. Sometimes they'll go down to Africa and then cross back over the Atlantic to their nesting grounds. And they are the turtle that can dive the deepest. So one of the there's many fascinating things about leatherbacks, but one of the primary things is, as you might imagine with their name, leatherback, they don't have a hard shell like the other sea turtles.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so it's much more flexible, which allows them to dive deeper. Because if a hard shell turtle dives deep, that pressure is going to crack that shell.
Oh. Oh, okay.
And so they can dive as deep as some of the bigger whales. It's been estimated they can go about it like a kilometer deep, which is like 2/3 of a mile, looking for these big jellyfish. They don't hang out down there, but they'll dive down that far to find their food and then come back up to the
On
surface.
the hunt, I guess. Oh,
Yes.
that's cool.
Another species that we work with a lot is the olive ridley, and they have a really unique part of their life cycle that's known as the arribada, which is Spanish for the arrival. And they have a handful of nesting beaches around the world where they arrive in mass numbers in like a short period of time, like 4 or 5 days. Huge numbers of turtles will come ashore and lay their eggs. So I have a colleague, our director, our program director is based in Oaxaca, Mexico. And she lives near and has worked on an Arribada beach, which is one of the two biggest in the world, where they will have as many as 500,000 olive ridley turtles coming ashore to nest in one event.
Is that the ones that they come in as a group to nest? Is that the ones that I read about? There's like they come in basically there'll be 60 or so many just come right in and nest together at the same time. Is that the one that I read about?
Yeah, probably. So yeah, they amass offshore in these huge numbers, and then they will kind of take turns day and night coming ashore and laying their eggs. So they're all nesting together, but over a several day period. And the belief is that the survival strategy is that they're laying all these eggs at one time. When those eggs hatch, that they will overwhelm the predators of them. So all the, and you may have seen this, but very few hatchlings survive until adulthood
Right.
because birds eat them and crabs eat them and fish and like everything that can eat them eats them. They're very,
Fire in them.
yeah, they're very vulnerable when they're the little, 3-inch long baby turtles. And so if there's a million of them or 5 million of them hatching at one time, the predators aren't going to get them all. Some of them are going to get through that gauntlet.
So the number I read, that's another question I had for you. The number I read, and again, when you read the internet, you never know what's true or not these days. But it said 1 in 1,000 reach adulthood. Is that a good number?
That's the best number that we have.
Okay,
So tracking the survival rate of a hatchling is incredibly difficult, as you might imagine, all the way to adulthood.
sure.
Like we do have satellite transmitters that we can put on adult turtles.
Wait a minute. Couldn't we just have Jay put numbers on all of them?
Yeah, exactly. We've done, researchers have done similar things to that. There's ways that you can like mark a shell, like deform them a little bit, which has some ethical concerns to it. But that number is not based on a ton of research. So there's some debate about how real that number is, but it's the best number that we have. In the last few years, they've started getting transmitters that are small enough to put on a hatchling, which is great, but they still only last a few months. So to be able to put a hatchling on put a transmitter on a hatchling that survives 15, 20, maybe it's 30 years that it can take for them to become adults, we're far from that technology.
Yeah.
So that's the best number that we use. And this has actually come up recently because we had a video of somebody releasing hatchlings, a partner in Indonesia, that we put on our Facebook page recently. And it was our most viewed, most viral post ever. Like 2 million people or something have seen it. And we've had a lot of comments on it. And the overwhelming thing that we're getting people saying is, well, why can't you hold on to them? So many of them are eaten, so few survive. Hold on to them till they're bigger. Why don't you do that? And it's a valid question.
Yeah. Almost like a hatchling farm until they get big enough and release them out there, right?
Yes, and there are places that do that. But the general conservation practice that we've learned, thousands of people working over decades, is that can cause as many problems as it solves. And 1 out of 1,000 is what we believe the natural rate is. So a female adult turtle will lay over its lifetime, depending on the species, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7,000 eggs.
Okay, so 3 to 7 adults for each female then.
That's the hope, right? And so
Right.
every nest can have anywhere from 80 eggs to 200 eggs. They're laying several times a season. They're laying every year or two for 30, 40, 50 years. That's a lot of eggs.
Right.
And so that's how nature evolved. And that is a big reason that sea turtles are important, because these hatchlings and eggs are a source of food for a lot of different predators.
Like dolphins.
I don't know that dolphins so much eat them. Like a killer whale one might eat a sea, but like fish and crabs and birds. So it's okay that 999 of them are not surviving until adulthood. So we don't need to raise them all. And every turtle nesting beach is raising thousands of hatchlings. Can you imagine the cost of keeping thousands of hatchlings in captivity? Like these projects are cash strapped to begin with.
Right.
And you're interfering with their natural instincts, right? They need to go and like learn how to find their food and how to survive on their own. And there can be health issues with turtles that are raised in captivity. So that's the majority of the conservation community says, get them in the water as fast as possible, protect them from the birds and the crabs until they get to the water. And then
it's Mother Nature then.
Yeah. And the good news is that the majority of sea turtle populations around the world are growing. There's fewer people eating the eggs. There's fewer people eating the meat. There's a lot of people working on these issues, and the numbers are growing. So we know it's working.
Well, another thing I read too is, and because you're a conservationist, I'm bringing this up, is with climate change, is that the sex of the turtles is determined. If the colder it is, it's the males, and the warmer it is, it's females. And now there's an over, I don't know what the number is, but is there an overpopulation of females because there's less males being born because the waters are now warmer?
Possibly. So yeah, just to go into a little bit of the science behind that. Turtles, like all reptiles, when they're in the egg, when the egg is laid, the sex of that individual is not yet determined. That is determined by the temperature of where it is in the nest. And so there's what's called a pivotal temperature, which is the ideal, where you're raising a mix, or we're not raising, but a mix of males and females
Right.
are being born from this nest. And it depends on the species, but it's around like 75 to 80 degrees is that pivotal temperature. And so, yes, the beach temperatures are growing with climate change. And so that is a big impact. And there have been a couple of studies. Determining the sex of a hatchling is very challenging. You can't look at one and tell. So you have to do some genetic testing where you're taking samples, and it's very expensive and time consuming and stuff. But there have been studies, I know of ones in Florida and in Australia, on nesting beaches where they were finding that basically all of their hatchlings were female. And it's incredibly concerning.
Sure.
Now, we can't necessarily extrapolate that that's what's happening on every beach or every nest, um, because there's different temperatures in different places. And then one of the measures that's being done to try to manage that is, in the places where there are these hatcheries, these closed off sections of beaches, you can shade part of it, and then they'll have thermometers in the nest to try to track and make sure that they're staying around that temperature.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Don't know for sure that that's working, but I know there are efforts in the sea turtle community to better be able to sex the hatchlings when they're born, so that we can have a better idea. But yeah, we really have no idea. But it is a real scary long term threat.
Well, what you could do is, this is me just being silly. You can get your organization to go there and have people come with fans, and they can just fan over them all the time and keep them cool.
Yeah, it'd have to be a pretty powerful fan to cool sand, which is like 3 feet deep in the beach. But
Or they could just bring in cold water over every now and then and do that.
yeah,
So let's talk about, because we're going to run long on here, and which is fine, by the way. Let's talk about, I don't know if it's all of them, but many turtles, when they're born and they come back to the exact same beach. One is, the question is, wow, that's cool. Two is, I know they haven't really, science is still figuring it out. I know they have an assumption. Can you talk a little bit about that?
sure. So sea turtles, like particularly the leatherback, they have kind of like a hole in their skull where they can judge with the position of the sun, and it's believed that that's sort of like a natural GPS. It helps them determine where they are so that they can return towards their home beaches. Some turtles are very, very faithful to their nesting beaches. The leatherbacks, like in the Caribbean, they can nest anywhere from Costa Rica down to Colombia, so they're not quite as faithful to their nesting beach, but generally they do return. And yeah, it's not an especially understood process. There's belief that, and I'll be honest, I don't understand it completely, but like some species of birds, they have iron in their blood.
Right. The Earth's magnetic pole or something. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. The closer they get to a pole, or the further that they get, that they can potentially sense that. There's also a belief, and I'm not sure how strong the science is behind this, though, is that when they're making their way from the nest to the water, that they're imprinting on the composition of the sand. Sand is made up of particles of different things, of shell, of
Sure.
dirt, of rock, and stuff, and that process helps them to then remember how to get back there. But I'm not sure we really understand that fully. So it's not something that we have a really strong sense of, but we have some clues about how they do that.
Well, you know what I love about that is, they've been around for, since prehistoric times, basically, and we still haven't figured it out. We think we're so smart all the time.
Uh-huh.
We can't figure out how they can home in onto that, which I think is, I kind of like the fact that science hasn't figured it completely out yet. I like that idea.
Yeah. Yeah, there's still so much that we don't know. I mean, people have been studying sea turtles like scientifically for 60 years and we figured out quite a bit, but there are still huge gaps in our knowledge. So I was talking about the Arabata. One example is so there's thousands of turtles sitting in the water and then at one moment they decide, all right, it's time and they start
Time, I
coming
know.
ashore. We have no idea how they make that decision. We like, are they communicating in some sort of like way that we can't, where like pheromones in the water or some sort of sound that we can't register? Or like, what is the signal for them to say, all right, we're ready to start going ashore?
So, is there people studying specifically how they communicate? Because the reason why I asked that is that one of the guests I had on was, she's one of the leading scientists in the world on dolphins, and she has an organization called Dolphin Communication Project, and how they communicate, and they communicate in four different ways. But they're still figuring it out.
We know that the hatchlings in the nest emit a high pitched sound that's called pipping. That's sort of like a, hey, I'm ready to go. Are you ready to go? Because they'll come out in a grouping.
Uh huh.
If you move up through the sand in a group, it's easier, that you don't all have to expend the energy climbing through the sand.
Mm-hmm.
So we know they communicate that way, and then I'm not fully up on it, but I know that somebody, I believe it was in the Caribbean, came out with a research paper recently that was able to detect some communication and sound between adult turtles that, as far as I'm aware, had never been recorded before. So it was a new thing. There's been a long belief that adult turtles don't have any like form of like audio communication like dogs.
So, question for you: what do you call a grouping of turtles? Is it a herd?
It's a bale, Bale.
A bale of I've never heard the term. I just was wondering why I was sitting here talking about we were sitting here talking about it.
Yep.
So, couple things. I let's talk about a couple of the turtles, and then I want to get into your organization.
To talk about our organization now, is that?
Yeah, let's talk about your organization and how people can help and where they can find out more information. I know you've got a bunch of different. Why don't you talk about some of the programs you have and all the other stuff too?
Yeah. So, yeah, we talked about the Nesting Beach program, Billion Baby Turtles. We talked about Torero Wear, which is our tortoiseshell trade program. We have another one that we call Sea Turtles in Plastic, related to turtles loving jellyfish. They also can confuse jellyfish for plastic. And really, plastic can impact sea turtles in so many different ways at every stage of their life cycle. So, we have a program that helps coastal communities do something with all the plastic that's washing ashore on these nesting beaches because they need to collect it and get it out of the way of the turtles and the hatchlings. So we provide grants for coastal communities to develop recycling infrastructure. They can purchase machinery and turn that stuff into things that they can use in the community or sell to travelers or things like that. And it brings in income for conservation for the local residents and helps do something with that plastic. Because, I mean, you're probably aware of this. Here in the US, we're recycling less than 10% of our plastic.
I know it's embarrassing.
It's a travesty. And so, in these tiny little remote coastal villages, there's no real strong waste disposal. The plastic is often burned, which is bad for the climate, bad for their health.
Sure.
So, we provide grants to help get these programs off the ground. And we've supported 15 or so of those projects. And we also provide funds for beach cleanups, which also gets money into the communities and helps get rid of that plastic. And we also have a program where we advocate for how people can use less plastic in their lives and to use their voices. That's one thing that I think kind of gets lost in a lot of the communications is, yeah, I can stop all my plastic usage. You can stop all your plastic usage, but there's so much more that needs to be done. So we really encourage people to use their voices to encourage governments. I know New York State they're hoping to pass some legislation to reduce plastic. Where I live in Oregon, we've passed some legislation and also encouraging businesses like supermarkets and companies like Coca-Cola, who they're the number one company for of their products being found on the beaches as litter. to reduce their packaging, to come up with alternatives, to reduce the amount of plastic that's ending up in the ocean to begin with. So we have a program called Travelers Against Plastic that does that as well. That you can find. That's an easy one. Travelers Against Plastic.org has a lot of those tips for holidays and travel and in your home and stuff like that. We have a program. So this is going to be published during Sea Turtle Week, which is our favorite week of the year. So a few years ago, we launched a program where we take the week that's between World Oceans Day, which is June 8th, and World Sea Turtle Day, which is June 16th. Each day in between that, there's 7 days, and we focus on a different species of sea turtle and a threat to those. So every day focuses. One day is Leatherback Day, and we focus on plastic. And one day is Hawksbill Day, and we focus on the tortoiseshell trade. And if you go to seaturtleweek.com, there's tons of stuff that you can find there, where you can find like graphics and videos and things that you can share in your social media. If you do this, please use the hashtag Sea Turtle Week so that we can track it, because every year we reach 8 to 10 million people with these messages during this week. And so, yeah, we're excited about that. It's coming up.
And which is one of the reasons why we're live this week. We're out this week, that we're putting this out there so you guys can be more aware too. And now you're going to learn this and you can participate once you hear this episode.
Yeah. So, yeah, seaturtleweek.com has everything you need. You can also look up Sea Turtle Week on all of the social media platforms and share from there. We would love that as well. And we have a very generous donor who's doing a matching campaign during Sea Turtle Week. So all donations that are made through our website that I'll talk about here in a second, but it's seeturtles.org, will be matched during Sea Turtle Week as well. So that's another program that we have. And then we also have one that we call the Inclusivity Fund. And that's scholarships to help members of these communities advance their careers within sea turtle conservation, because the reality is, and still in a lot of places, the people that have the higher paying, higher skilled jobs in this world, the PhDs and stuff, are people from outside of the communities where the turtles live. So we provide scholarships for people in these communities so that they can manage the work that's happening in their communities, make the decisions for their communities, and not just be, the people that get paid minimum wage walking up and down the beach, that they can have real control over what's happening in the places that they live. So those are and then I almost forgot the reason that we got started, our conservation travel program. We have trips that people can join to go to Costa Rica, different places in Mexico, Panama, Belize. And we'll be bringing back trips. We've had trips in the past, and we're bringing back trips to the Galapagos and to Cuba, where you can go and meet some of our partners, help measure the turtles, help release the little baby turtles into the water. And the money from these tours are going into the local community. They're supporting the conservation work. So you get this incredible opportunity to play marine biologist for a week, meet these amazing people, see these incredible animals, and leave a positive benefit in the places where you're going. And so we really love those trips. We love to have people join.
What's the age limit on those trips?
It depends on the trip. The minimum we usually say is 8 years old, because some of them do involve walking on the nesting beaches, which can be tiring, but they're not especially physically demanding. You are going to some pretty remote areas in some cases. And, we say you're not staying in a 5-star resort. A lot of cases you're staying in rustic research stations where there might not be hot water. You'll be in the rainforest, so there's lots of bugs around and heat and stuff like that. So we're not the kind of trips that if you want like a resort experience, but if you want something real, meet the communities, learn about the cultures, and learn about the animals, then you can join us. And so you can find all of that on our website, seeturtles.org.
Well, personally, that to me is like a luxury resort. I'd love to do something like that. It's great.
We'd love to have you join. It'd be a lot of fun.
It would be a lot of fun. Okay, so I mentioned to you about a joke, and I know that I'm going to be stuck telling my one. So I have a turtle joke for you.
Uh-huh.
Let's see if you can get this one.
Okay.
What do you get when you cross a turtle and a giraffe?
Turtle and a giraffe.
Yeah.
Oh, it's got to be like a turtleneck?
Hey, you may be the first one ever got one of my silly jokes.
Well, I did a little research and I've got one for you as well.
Oh, good. Let's hear it.
What is the favorite kind of photo that a turtle likes to take?
Let me think. I don't know. What is it?
A selfie.
Oh, I like that one too. Good. That's perfect. Okay, everybody that's out there listening, we both know, both me and Brad know that you can probably have a better one for us. But
Probably.
if one of your kids want to tell a joke, anybody but us would be great. We'd love to have you join us on the show to tell us a joke, you, your friends, whatever. But more importantly, for everybody out there. And first off, Brad, thanks so much for being on. I know everybody out here is going to really appreciate it. But also for everybody else that's listening, thank you so much. Keep listening, start following, pass the word about the turtles to everybody. SeaTurtles.org. There's a lot of good information there. And as usual, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart, for real.
Thank you for having us. It was a real pleasure.
Oh, it's even more of a pleasure for me.
For real, 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 for real.
We're supported by Let's Walk, that's here to love your animals like our own.
Austin, Houston, and Denver. Let's Walk is here to love your animals like our own. From daily walks, play, in-house sleepovers, and more. Go to work, out on the town, or take a vacation knowing your pets are in the best hands. This woman-owned small business does it all. Check us out on Instagram at Let's Walk Austin, Houston, and Denver.
That concludes this episode of For Real with your host, Mark Kyle. For previous and future episodes of For Real, listen via all major podcast streaming sites.